Haider show, and we have an amazing guest today. He was actually one of the first people to interview me and really help put me on the map, actually, for a lot of patients. So I owe him a debt of gratitude. And I'm talking about Dr. Mobeen Syed, or who, as he's known affectionately by his fans, Dr. Bean or King Bean. And so, anyway, for people who don't know him, he's a prolific and much loved medical educator with over 1 million followers all over social media. He's treated, as far as I know, hundreds at least of COVID patients worldwide, especially in the Indian subcontinent and Pakistan, with off-label protocols. And he also helped pioneer the short course of low-dose prednisone, and now we use it a little bit longer sometimes for long-haul patients. But he got me started with that, and that's helped a lot of my patients as well. So he was the first person who told me about trying that, and so me and my patients owe him a debt of gratitude for that. He's also helped develop treatment protocols with Dr. Pierre Corey of the FLCCC, especially the I Recover Long COVID protocol that's available at flccc.net. So really, he's been a tremendous boon for all of us dealing with COVID, either as practitioners or as patients. And just to let you know where you can find him, you can get his popular medical lectures at drbean.com. He's also on YouTube. But anyway, without further ado, let me introduce and bring on Dr. Bean. Dr. Mubin, thanks for being here with us. It's such a pleasure.
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you very much for such a glowing introduction.
No problem. So you're
I am
really
actually your
the
fan.
superstar. No, no,
The
no.
reality is, I'm your fan.
You're very kind. You're actually too kind. I didn't really prepare questions because there's so many things that I want to ask you. If I could pick your brain for hours, this could go on for 10 hours if you let it. But I'm going to try to keep it inside of 1 hour. So I guess just to begin with, I'm sure you're aware that the FLCCC has come up with a vaccine injury protocol now. Did you have anything to do with the development of that?
Absolutely. So, first of all, for the time, please take your time as long as you want to. I have seen that shorter videos are generally more viewed. So, maybe keeping it within an hour for that purpose may be
Mm,
decent. But otherwise, we can have multiple discussions or we can continue today as well. No issues on my side.
okay.
Uh, so, yes, I Recover protocol, which was for the long haul, was mainly led by me. But this I Recover vaccine injury protocol was actually led by Dr. Paul Merrick himself.
Mm,
And him and I worked very closely. For example, many of the therapies, um, first line therapies, were suggestions or papers that I had seen and shared with him. And similarly,
mm.
he. So him and I worked very closely. And then we had uh, the rest of the doctors review and revise and provide their input.
I see. So I did have some questions. I'll just pull up the protocol on the screen here. So the protocols are a little bit different. So why do you think, do you also believe that the protocols should be different for long haulers and those who are vaccine injured? And if so, why do you think there should be a difference? And what do you think the underlying differences in the pathologies would be that would mean that slightly different protocols would help for each
So
population?
that's a very, very interesting question. And I will start with this. And maybe in certain cases, I Recover and I Recover vaccine may be looked at the same way. However, what I've seen is in the case of viral long haul, there is a possibility of more than just the spike protein that may be causing the dysregulation. For example, we know that the N protein as well, or nucleocapsid protein, also has toxigenic effects and immune dysregulatory effects, which are definitely missing in the vaccines, other than those vaccines that are inactivated virus vaccines, but generally these are missing. Similarly, viral behavior of entering into a cell and then using the cell machinery and then causing the dysregulation, that is not, at least in theory, not the same with the vaccine and vaccines mechanisms of dysregulation. So from those point of view, generally the approach for management will be different. If you look at top down, that is what is going on with the patient, then you would see that in both cases. And by the way, your picture is here. So when I see here, I'm really looking at you.
Okay,
So my apologies. I'm not.
no problem.
I don't have an audience. So when you look at a patient from top down, They may have similar symptoms. These are the symptoms of inflammation. But if you look at the core or the bottom up, the basic pathology and then above, then there are definitely differences. Vaccine also can cause injury because of the vaccine's adjuvants that are not part of the virus itself. And the adjuvants are actually made to trigger the immune system, to make it mad so that it can respond more to that tiny amount of the vaccine. And the some of the adjuvants themselves have the allergic or toxic effects. Because of that, in principle, both of those protocols will be different. There are certain overlaps because vaccine and the virus are very similar in terms of spike proteins, but I think they would grow separately.
Yeah, the biggest difference, I mean, I just saw the vaccine protocol today for the first time, but the biggest difference I noted was that hydroxychloroquine is included in the vaccine protocol, but as far as I know, it's not included in the iRecover protocol. So can you speak a little bit about what that's targeting and, why that was included over there and maybe the history of hydroxychloroquine,
Yeah,
what the
so
reasoning was
once
for that?
again, if you look at hydroxychloroquine, Uh, from a very basic functional point of view, hydroxychloroquine is acting as something that is changing the pH, which then can cause the virus to not flourish that well in the cells because their pH is changed, their lysosomal activity is changed and has become more dangerous. So hydroxy does have a benefit even in the case of COVID. However, in the case of COVID, there are in my opinion, so I'm not representing FLCCC when I'm saying this, in my opinion, in the protocols, the drugs like Ivor have changed the game, which uh, ivermectin may be a little more safer, more available, and so on. On the
Yeah.
other hand, with the vaccine, hydroxy's basic benefit, once again, is as an anti inflammatory more than antiviral or anti spike. And
Mm.
that anti inflammatory plus the zinc channel router is a very important contributor to this protocol. It may be that in the future, as the protocol evolves, the pathogenesis becomes more clear and more targeted medicines come in. This may become second line or third line, but today it is part of the protocol for its anti inflammatory behavior.
I see. Another interesting thing I saw was the addition of magnesium for the vaccine protocol and no zinc. Um, I think zinc is part of all the other protocols. And so, another question I had for you was, have you personally had experience using the hydroxychloroquine or heard from patients who used it either for long COVID or for the vaccine injury? Because I myself haven't used it a whole lot yet
Hmm.
for long haulers. But there are a few patients who came to me and they tried everything else and it wasn't working, or maybe they had a lot of musculoskeletal symptoms and we tried hydroxychloroquine and it did work. But I've only done it a couple of times. So, have you had experience using it clinically?
Absolutely. So for the long COVID, yes. For vaccine injury, no. And maybe I will try it at some point. This hydroxy's addition was Paul's idea. Uh, for long COVID, I remember one of the cases very profoundly. There was a patient who was, I believe, 70 ish, not 70, 65, in that range. And she developed long COVID. And during the COVID, I had started her on hydroxy, and then the COVID became over, and I stopped hydroxy and other drugs. And a couple of weeks later, she started developing symptoms again. I was not aware, they didn't contact me. But about 4 weeks later, her family member was a medical student who was my student. And so she spoke with me, and I said, "How's your mother doing?" And she said she has started taking hydroxy again. And I said, "Why did she start taking hydroxy again? She should not take it. It's not a drug just to take it whenever you want." And she said, "No, my mom started developing cough and the congestion. And she says that hydroxy helps a lot. So she just takes it by herself." Meaning it does have a benefit in long COVID as well. That is
Right.
my
Yeah.
experience too.
Definitely, I've seen that with some people. So in the beginning, when when we first got in touch with each other, and you had me on your show, I remember that we had spoken about prednisone, as I mentioned in the intro. Have you noticed that what was working before is not working as well now? Because I remember back then you were telling me that basically everyone you had tried the low dose prednisone for 2 weeks on had gotten better from
Yeah,
long COVID, or had not, even developed long COVID, right? If you used it in the second week, I
correct.
think it was. So, in your estimation, have things changed? Has the virus changed? Has the response of people changed? And is it harder to treat now? Both the acute infection and long COVID, are they a different animal kind of now? Are they harder to treat? You have to use different things now.
So interestingly, because I'm more um, a physician more sought after by medical students and
Mm,
doctors, and usually am engaged that way instead of general practice.
mm,
And so I look after the acute COVID patients less. I believe
mm,
there is a lot of knowledge now in doctors for how to manage it. Plus, Omicron has changed some of the effects as well. However, for the long COVID, for me, here is the interesting thing. And this is my observation. I may be wrong, or this may not be replicatable. It's not a study. But my observation is I always start with the steroids and then ivermectin and then low dose naltrexone. However, if a regime fails, and this is always an interesting question, why did it fail? Was the patient um, exposed to the virus once more? Or was it some other trigger of inflammation that caused the inflammation to resurface, which was being controlled by the regulatory cells? Whatever it is, if they develop a relapse, it turns out that the previous protocol starts becoming less effective,
hmm
and you got to change it. That was the weirdest thing. I mean, there is no mechanistic justification for this. But in my patients, if I give them steroid, ivermectin, and let's say fluvoxamine, they feel better, 90% good. They are back to their function, their work, they're happy. 2 months later, they say, I went and did this and I had a relapse. And you say, all right, let's try the same thing again. And this time it is not working that well. So
This
the
actually triggers something in my mind. I just have to jump in here before I forget it. Sorry.
yes,
Um, so, very early on, probably in the first few months that I was treating long COVID, one of my patients, very intelligent young lady, having a very hard time with it. She was doing a lot of research on her own. And so she came across this chronic illness in cats called feline enteric coronavirus. I don't know if you've heard of this.
I
Um,
have not.
and so apparently it's a different coronavirus. It's not COVID-19, but it's a chronic. So they get infected with this coronavirus, and it turns from an acute infection into a chronic infection, and it stays in their GI tract. um, so it just occurred to me that I was also very puzzled by this, that the same thing you've tried before doesn't work at all sometimes, right? You give them ivermectin and they get so much better, and then they go off of it maybe too quickly, or they just relapse a few months later, and then the second time around ivermectin doesn't work. If you think about it, like, what if there were a chronic infection sequestered somewhere in the body? It's not really on the surface. It's not in the GIT, but maybe in the lymph nodes, somewhere in an organ or a tissue that's not near enough the surface, that you're not going to produce mRNA or spike protein that reaches your secretion, into your secretions. So, have you considered this idea that maybe there's something that we haven't discovered yet in long COVID patients, like a chronic viral infection, which would help explain why maybe the virus itself is evolving to become, resistant to the earlier therapies? Have you thought about this?
Absolutely. So you are so much on the money. And this is a continuous research for me to figure out, is there virus hiding somewhere?
Mm,
The latest possibility, the paper that I read, was the coronavirus acting as a bacteriophage and living in the gut microbiome.
mm,
And from there, not only disrupting the microbiome, but then from there, kind of continuously infecting the remaining tissues with a very subclinical level, and then resulting in clinical outcomes. So there is a possibility. I haven't yet found conclusive evidence, or may I say, repeated evidence. There are
Mm,
some studies that say that somewhere in the gut, the coronavirus is sitting. The question still becomes this: let's say the virus is sitting in the gut. Let's assume that for our discussion. Why did it respond first? And then when it reappeared or resurfaced, did it actually become resistant enough to this therapy that now it is not able to be controlled, or something else happened? Or is there a dysregulation? So,
right.
still very interesting questions. One drug that I've seen both in vaccine injured and long COVID that continues to work as a mainstay to keep the patient situation from deteriorating too much is low dose naltrexone. I am just, I've become such a fan of this drug that many times patients, when they celebrate that everything is good, I have recovered, they stop
Mm,
everything. And if they get a relapse, because so there is a study that showed that relapse can occur because of mental work, strenuous physical exercise,
mm.
or stress. And if that happens, then other drugs may not be as effective, but low dose naltrexone tries to bring them back towards 90% again. So
That's
that was very
amazing.
interesting.
Yeah. So I was just talking to a patient today about it, and I realized I don't really know how it works. I mean, I know it, affects the opioid receptors, and I think it's been used before in autoimmune diseases. So do you understand a little bit of why it might be working for long haulers?
Yeah, so this is the funniest thing. Mechanism is still unknown.
Hmm,
Meaning the full dose naltrexone has been studied a lot because it is used for in addiction, and it has
mhm,
effects on the mu receptors. But in low doses, how exactly does this behave as an anti-inflammatory? It behaves like an anti-inflammatory. Exactly what is the mechanism is not known. There are so many theories. And the
mm,
other interesting thing, this almost seems magical, is this: that if you keep increasing the low dose, because there are doctors, scientists, researchers who says, wow, this is magical, so why not I give a little more in dose? As you increase the dose, the effect goes away. So it has to be
mm,
this low dose. It actually has to be low dose. And so the dose range that I'm seeing is 1 milligram per day to up to 10.5. But the optimal range has been up to 4.5 milligram per day. And in the increments of 1.5 milligram. And uh, if you don't mind, can I explain how to you do it so it would look uh,
sure.
so you offer it in 1.5 milligram first dose. If the patient has a reaction or has side effects, GIT side effects, then you don't quit that, but you reduce it to half, keep
Mm,
giving it for a week, and then start escalating it by doubling it every week to up to 4.5. But I've seen that patients mostly within 1.5 to 3 milligram, they respond very well. So your original question, what is the mechanism of action? Not known really.
So, just to be clear about the protocol, you go from 1.5. If they don't tolerate it, you go down to 1 or
Half
down to
it.
point half. Oh, go down to half?
Yeah. Yeah. So
Okay.
literature says half it. You can go down to one if you want, because having that will mean you go back to the compounding pharmacy and say, can you please
Mm,
compound half of it?
mm,
Right. So literature says have it, then try that once again for a week. And once the patient has come out of the side effects, then start doubling it. But of course, you can go down to one if needed.
okay. Yeah, that's really interesting. And what about
And just a quick
fluvoxamine? Yeah.
shout out: Blues Lover says, say hi to Luffy. I will. Luffy is actually sleeping in the other room.
The Luffy's your cat, right?
Yeah. Luffy has to
Um,
appear in every talk.
yes. So maybe he is it a he or a she? I think it's a he, right?
It's a he. So I have two
Yeah.
cats. Luffy is a he and Kairi is a she.
Okay. Maybe they'll wake up and come join you. So, and hopefully they don't have feline enteric coronavirus, but that's just a joke. So I was just asking about fluvoxamine. Have you do you still find it to be helpful, especially for people who have neurological symptoms from long haul or from the
Yes.
vaccines?
Yes. So LDN, and fluvoxamine and magnesium are
Mm,
very important mainstays for neurological symptoms. Now, fluvoxamine is an interesting situation. Fluvoxamine in some people actually exaggerate their neurological symptoms.
mm,
And so one has to administer fluvoxamine, watch it a couple of days. That means that this has to be a communication with the patient to say, please try it for a couple of days. And if you got more symptoms, then stop this drug. So fluvoxamine is still a very decent drug. It still works like magic. But compared to LDN, fluvoxamine in some people can exaggerate their symptoms.
yeah. So about the magnesium, I know there's so many different forms of magnesium. Is it important to take a certain form, like magnesium threonate? I know has been talked about in the past in functional medicine circles because it enters the brain perhaps better.
So I have not done this research that what is the kind. So why not I hear it from you? So which one
No,
were you talking about?
no. I've heard, in among physicians who've been treating neurological things like dementia, or pre-dementia. Um, Dale Bredesen, for example, who wrote The End of Alzheimer's, he's a functional medicine. He has a functional medicine approach to treating dementia and pre-dementia, and so he recommends magnesium threonate. Apparently, I haven't gone down the rabbit hole for this, topic, but apparently it enters the brain, where there's a lot of the other forms don't. So some forms will stay in the gut primarily and give you the diarrhea.
Mm.
Other forms are very well absorbed through the gut, but maybe not so well into the brain. But magnesium threonate is absorbed better into the brain. So that's as much as I know about it.
Got it.
Um, but yeah, this had brought up another question for me. So early on, I heard some people recommending if fluvoxamine didn't work, then maybe trying Elavil. Do you have any idea why that would work? Like, and where that idea came from? That it she and I have heard some people. I've actually tried it myself, and some people do respond to the Elavil when they didn't with the fluvoxamine.
Not at all. I'm hearing this for the first
Oh,
time, Heather.
okay.
So I'm getting some knowledge here. Thank you very much. No, I
Yeah.
have not tried it or heard of that.
I think it
The
was
most
Fareed Jalali who mentioned it first that I
Farid,
know of. Yeah, I
Farid
think
is very
so.
good. So if he
Yeah,
is
yeah.
saying it, I'm sure that there is something in the background for that.
Mm,
Farid is good. I like him. I respect him. Um, for the couple of interesting things that are new, and I was actually going to record videos for FLCCC for it. One is the repeated transcranial magnetic stimulation. Have
mm.
you heard of that?
I've heard of it, but
RTMS.
not for but not for this.
So here is a problem, and I want to ask you about this as well. And this is my curiosity. It is not a segue for you to talk, but it really is a curiosity, and that is tinnitus. Patients
Mm,
of long COVID or patient of vaccine injury who develop tinnitus, it becomes very difficult to manage that, and they become refractory. And so there is a study from Taiwan, which I shared a few days ago on my YouTube channel, where that woman who was, this was a case report, actually, not a study, one case, 37 years old woman, developed tinnitus. She had tinnitus before she got the vaccine, and then she developed tinnitus after Pfizer vaccine. And the tinnitus went up from a level of 16 or 18 uh, disability inventory to 93. So almost to a point of desperation and maybe even suicide.
mm, mm,
And they started treating her with corticosteroids and one more azithromycin, I believe, one antibiotic. Oh, sorry, ceftriaxone. And she recovered up to 82, which was still very bad. And then they did this transcranial magnetic stimulation, I believe, one session per day for 10 or 15 days. And her tinnitus, Heather, check this out. Her tinnitus went down from 82 to 6,
wow. Wow.
right?
Incredible.
And the question was, why did that happen? And this is the magnetic stimulation. I mean, if somebody else is going to come to me and say give magnetic stimulation, I'm going to say there's a tin hat discussion. But
Yeah.
that is the study they did. And so that magnetic stimulation, they say, was able to reduce inflammation in the brain. Now, was that a physical effect, that there are magnetic pulses and that are causing blood flow or lymphatic flow or something else? I don't know. But that is one. And the second thing that I really think, and I'm going to present that in the coming days, both on FLCCC and on my YouTube channel, is the coconut oil. So you are hearing that, and please tell me if you are, with the vaccine injury, you're seeing a lot of brain fog and
Mm,
cognitive problems,
yeah.
word recalls, word finding, statement difficulty with memory recall, difficulty with planning, focusing. Many people who are planners, or for example, event planners or CEOs, or they are
Mm,
finding it very difficult to plan the way they used to. And coconut oil produces ketone bodies, which are very useful for the brain to reduce inflammation, and it
mm,
improves the cognition. So I am actually preparing to talk about some of those papers in context of this. So you are the first channel now who know about this. So if your audience can, with their doctor's advice, maybe use, and their doctor may be sitting right over here. So with
mm.
your advice, maybe shifting the the responsibility, if they can use some coconut oil, that may be very interesting.
And maybe MCT oil also. It's more of a fractionated version
Plus
of coconut
MCT oil,
oil.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah, that I think that's incredibly useful. And it is mentioned in the I Recover protocol for the vaccine
yeah,
injuries, the intermittent fasting, right? So
correct.
so have you seen people? I know Doctor, what is it? Tom Bunker has this, he was the first time I saw somebody mention that maybe you should try fasting, and he's published a fasting protocol online. He recommends really not doing anything but the fasting, and I think he says fast twice a week, and maybe on the weekends, along with intermittent fasting. But have you seen people recover well from with the fasting, and maybe even
Yep.
like kind of like a ketogenic diet? Has that been tried?
Absolutely. So you'll find this very funny that sometimes with my long COVID patients, when I discuss things with them, mechanisms, possible solutions, I slip in this statement that, hey, intermittent fasting is an interesting area as well.
Mm,
And many times when patients call me back, let's say a month away or 2 months ago or after, with some relapse, guess what are they're mostly saying to me? They're saying, got a relapse. I do not know, the previous medicines are not working. I started fasting
mm,
and it is helping.
wow.
And I did a talk. Did you did you see the mechanism? I mean, of course you know it. This is more of a rhetorical question. I'm so excited about it. Intermittent fasting, what it does is, not only this is that there is less energy available to immune system cells, and so they're not able to fight and war as much, but it promotes autophagy.
Mm, yep.
Correct. So on my channel I said that just like if we are hungry and starving, our bodies look inward to say, what can I eat, what can I use? So it is going to use the glucose stores and then fats and then eventually even muscles and uh, those critical tissues.
Hmm.
Cell does the same thing. And my apologies, Heather, if you that I look like I'm repeating some things that you know, but this may be
No, no.
interesting for the
Yeah,
audience
no.
as
The
well,
audience should hear it. Yeah.
right? So cell does the autophagy. So cell looks inward. So imagine if this is a cell, the cell's machinery says, well, we're not getting food from outside, but we need to operate and continue to function. So what can we look inwards, which may not be useful, which may just be lying around, and can I break it down into smaller amino acids and things and eat it up? So in that process, the cell starts breaking down things sitting in various vesicles, in various pockets. Guess what happens? Not only cell breaks down hidden spike proteins or hidden viruses, the older cells that are more active, immune cells, are killed first. The
Mm,
reason for that is that because they're active, Their demand is more, and you have starved them. So here is a lazy cell sitting and saying, you know what, I'm just sleeping. And here is an active cell. So when you don't give food to the active cell dies first. And that is a problem with the long COVID or vaccine injury, that there are active dysregulated cells. So number one, they die first. Number two, they start doing the autophagy and they break down. Imagine I have vaccine injury and my cells are carrying on to, let's say, spike protein. Now, when the autophagy starts happening and the spike protein is broken down for the cell to use it, cell will present some of it on the surface as well. This is part of the autophagy,
Mm.
that when you break down things, you present them on MHC as well. The result of that is that allows an immune cell to come and attack this cell to remove it. And in this cell, there may be a virus or spike protein hidden in there for a long time, which just got demolished. So, intermittent fasting has just such a beautiful mechanism to help with chronic, such dysregulated diseases.
That's
I love it.
incredible. Yeah, and the interesting thing is a lot of the medications that we're prescribing also trigger autophagy or autophagy, ivermectin included. But what this reminds me of is the importance of sleep for helping your brain get rid of junk proteins, right? And so this is a big problem for a lot of long haulers and vaccine injured. A lot of them have trouble falling asleep. A lot of them have trouble staying asleep. A lot of them have this kind of like pounding sensation. Their heartbeat is racing or pounding when they lie down at night. So how do you help people get like a restful, healthy, 8 hours or whatever it takes? Some of them need even more, of sleep at night.
So, this is a problem. And this was a problem for myself as well. And so that means everyone is going to have to find a solution that works for them.
Mm,
When I was going through COVID, and then I had some of the cool beans I'm seeing here in the discussion channel.
mhm.
They know that I had been coughing for about a month afterwards. Till before I continued this discussion, do you know that I could not fix the post-COVID cough, and my wife managed me?
Really?
I tried everything in the
Uh,
world, and guess what she did?
an herb,
She
or
took
maybe? I mean, what did she do?
yes, yes. My mind was blown. What she did was she took ajwain or carom seeds,
Mm,
and what she did was she put half a teaspoon in a cup of water, and then she boiled it down to half, and then she gave me that 3 times only, and my cough went away.
amazing.
Even to this date, I debate in my head. I don't do it in front of her. I debate in my head that was it just that the viral phase for cough was over and that coincided with her giving me ajwain, or was it really the ajwain? So I don't know. But the cough went away soon after that.
That's
So we were
incredible.
talking about the what was the original the sleep.
Yeah, like sleeping. Yeah, just what have people tried or what has helped them? I know
Yeah,
some people get a little drowsy with fluvoxamine. Some people actually, it's the opposite.
correct.
It's even harder to fall asleep with fluvoxamine.
Yeah.
But I saw
Yeah.
in
So
the new. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
please go ahead,
I
and
was
then
just going
I'll
to
add
say
on.
that in the new FLCCC I recover for the vaccine injuries, they mention maybe doing they've started to mention also in the I recover for long haulers, maybe something like cognitive behavioral therapy or these lifestyle changes. And obviously
Correct.
there's things you can do to help you sleep from a lifestyle perspective, cleaning up sleep hygiene. But also in the newest protocol, tai chi is mentioned. So maybe just relaxing throughout the day, doing something like yoga or qigong or tai chi
Correct.
might also be helpful.
Correct. Absolutely. So, if not Tai Chi, yoga, if not yoga, forest bathing.
Mm,
Interestingly, that Japanese study that said, so in Japan, what they did was they wanted to understand if the forest bathing was helping to relax, and by proxy, then increasing the natural killer cells and reducing the stress hormones. So they sent a bunch of people to a forest, actual forest, and a bunch of people to a city, and gave them off and money and said, you just go do whatever you want. The people in the city have you have fun. And they found out that even when the people were in the city, and they were given the money and the vacation, and they were going to clubs and they were having fun. Even then, the people who went to forest had better increased number of natural killer cells and reduced amount of the stress hormones. So yoga or tai chi or forest bathing or whatever else can relax you. What I saw was melatonin helps,
Mm,
but melatonin can give nightmares. So you keep reducing the dose to the point of um, where it doesn't give you nightmares. Sometimes when I take melatonin, I actually wake up crying with the vividity of the of the dreams and the scare of the dreams. So you reduce the dose to the point where you don't have those dreams. So, and you can also use slow release melatonin that would help. Even if you wake up during the night, you will be able to go back to sleep, because sometimes it is the problem is beginning of the sleep. Sometimes the problem is that if your sleep is interrupted, then falling back to sleep. So melatonin works for both. That is one. Then in my most difficult time with the sleep, I found out that for me rain sound was very helpful.
mm,
So I would put on the rain sound, and that would just make me feel great. And I was able to go to sleep with that. Then, before the evening, a little walk, maybe walk in a park, that was very helpful. Then, lymphatic massages, the massage of, and there are many YouTube videos where there are professionals who show how to do lymphatic massages of the head and neck. And that has been very useful, because what happens is, as the inflammation increases in the brain, the sleep disturbance and behavioral disturbances are part of that. So to
mm,
reduce the inflammation, when you do this massage, you kind of pump the fluids out and you
mm,
reduce some of the inflammation. That doesn't cure the reason for the inflammation, but that reduces the inflammation for some time, that you can fall to sleep. And then of course, if that doesn't help, then sleep medicines may be needed, but
mm.
generally these things can be tried.
Yeah, so it reminds me of a study that was done. You've probably heard of it years ago, where they took insomniacs. This was pre-COVID, and they took them camping. And apparently, I mean, basically everyone was cured after a few days, like 3 days of camping. No unnatural lighting, around. So
Yeah.
basically, kind of resyncing their body clocks. But that study that you mentioned about the forest bathing, I find interesting, because you would wonder, is it just something about being relaxed and out of a stressful environment, or is there really something specific to forest, like a different electromagnetic field or something, that you know a real difference between the forest and the city, and not related to just being relaxed and having the sound of birds around you, but if there's
Yes.
something, some other difference. What do you think? Do you think that there may be something else to explain how forest bathing
Yes.
is working, aside from just the relaxation
Yes.
aspect?
And I was actually trying to find the exact word. I always forget this word. Uh, these are called plant oils, but there's a term for them. I forgot. But here is what happens: the researchers found that people who go near trees, see, there is an aroma from the trees.
Mm,
So those scents that are uh, dispersed by the trees are actually oils from the trees. And these oils have a specific name, and they are actually available separately as well. Um, the name was phytoncides or something, I forgot.
mm.
So going to the forest or being near the trees when they are releasing those oils are the ones that actually help us. And this is why relaxing in a city is not useful,
Mm.
because we don't have, even if we are sitting in a club and we are all relaxed and there's good music, that may have its own effect, but it doesn't have those oils in the environment that in turn helps the stress hormones to go down.
So, are these oils available? Can you put them into a diffuser or
Yes.
something? Yeah,
Yes, yes.
amazing.
So my biggest problem at this time, I forgot their names, but yes, these plant oils are actually. So how about I find the name and give it to you? It's actually a very common name. I just forgot. and maybe we can then
Yeah,
publish it or
I'll
comment.
put it in the description,
Yeah,
and so people can go and look at that. But yeah, so getting an essential diffuser, I mean, that sounds like a fantastic idea. You can put it around your
yes,
house and just have those oils going.
correct.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I wanted to maybe switch gears a little bit and just ask you, after everything you know now, um, if you could go back in time,
Yes.
would you take the shot, again for the first time
Is that a
back then?
trick question or not? Okay, so I'll I'll give you my answer. This is a question that has been asked so many times and I avoid it,
Hmm.
but I'm going to answer it here. I am 53. I do not have actually any comorbidities. What I know now, the kind of outcomes that have become permanent with people, I will be very much afraid. And I think if I go back, my comparison will be, am I scared enough that I'll have long COVID or vaccine injury for the rest of my life? Or am I scared enough that the virus is going to cause damage and long COVID and disability for the rest of my life? And you
Hmm.
can tell when I'm speaking it this way that even you will not be able to make that decision for me,
Yeah,
to say that, hey,
of
I'm a
course.
doctor, I can give you the decision right now, because it is not uniformly applicable to everyone. So I have started thinking more in this way. Let me back up one more second. My wife and I, she got the vaccine and she got injured and she's still struggling with it, 95% better, but still has the, for example, last week she said she was just, she went downstairs and she was going, there was loud thumping sounds, and she's a young healthy woman, and I thought that sound was strange the way she was walking. So I called her and I said, why are you walking like this? And she said, my joints are aching. Then 2 days later her joint aches went away, and yesterday she was saying, I'm just so very tired, I don't know why. And she
Hmm.
never had these things. So if somebody asked me to make that decision for her to go get a vaccine, I will never want to make that decision, right?
That makes
So
sense. Yeah.
on the other hand, if you ask me, I have become very scared. I am still a pro vaccine person who believes in vaccines and their benefits, but this vaccine has started making me very scared of the outcomes. If there was a plan in front of my eyes that had said that the healthcare authorities agree that there can be vaccine injury, and as soon as the vaccine is given, if following symptoms appear, we will provide you insurance, we will provide you coverage, we'll do following tests, we'll make sure that you get back to normalcy as much as you can, and now here is the risk benefit for you.
Hmm.
If that was there, I would have been a little more easier. But you can see, I don't know if you are aware of this or not, I'm sure you are, these are my rhetorical questions, so please don't be offended.
No problem.
They don't, there is no care for
Yeah.
whoever is vaccinated. There is actually a deliberate attempt to keep it hidden. I
Hmm.
think there is a deliberate attempt to keep it hidden,
Without a
because
doubt.
the that
Yeah.
study that came out of NIH and IND, so you got me started now. The study that came out of NIH and IND, you saw that study, right? The neuropathy study.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So couple of weeks ago, a study came out. I can actually show you that study. I talked about it as well. So let me see if I can quickly bring it up.
Maybe I can find it.
Um, neuro, neuropathy, NIH, uh,
I found a news article. I'll
neuropathy.
just put it in there.
I hope you,
Let's
just a quick
see.
second. So peripheral neuropathy spectrum. This is my discussion about it. Why not we go here, and I'm going to go to my own talks links, and in the link I would have, is this a, this is a, I clicked something else. So just one quick second please. Here, I believe this is the preprint. Okay, so check this out.
Hmm.
This study came out, when did it come out? This was Um, May 17, 2022. If I can very quickly share my screen, if you don't mind.
Sure. Oh, there we go. Great.
Okay, so here is the study, and my audience has seen this study. This study came out on May 17, 2022. The study is from NIH, NIND, so National Institute of Health and National Institute of Neurological Disorders, NIND. Where is it? Funding statement. National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke. So it is an official study. And it says, for the first time ever, they've number one agree that there can be neuropathic symptoms with SARS-CoV-2 vaccination. Right. So that is a important thing that they agreed now. I think that putting these studies out now is kind of covering your behind to say, yes, we knew it and we very quickly put them out too. They knew this from this study started in January of 2021. December 2020 is when the vaccination started. They knew it in January.
Hmm.
They kept going with this till June. Then they stopped talking with the patients in September. So September till now, they were in the process of writing it up. There were 23 total patients. They were in the process of writing it up, and finally they could only find a place to put it on a preprint
Hmm.
server. I mean, there are many people who stood up to defend them, to say a study takes time to be reviewed and processed and accepted. Man, you would see studies in the journals that say we are making it available quickly so that the information is available. We are still reviewing and
Yeah.
processing. They couldn't do that being NIND. And in here, the thing that I found was disingenuous. And again, my opinion, I may be wrong, but what
Hmm.
I found was disingenuous is that they said, yes, neuropathies can occur. Two, they will be resolved if corticosteroids are given or if electrophoresis is done. And I had
Wow.
one of the patients who are participant in it who said, I still am not cured, while the study has declared her
Hmm.
cured last year. And she's
Incredible.
still getting immuno IVIGs and other treatments. That is a person here, she, Bree. And then this Friday, I'm going to have another person, Dr. Dennis, who is also part of this study, who also is still struggling.
Hmm.
So the point I'm making is, you triggered me on this one, that would I take the vaccine or not? My point is, if they had not hidden and thrown these things under the rug and ignored these patients, I would have felt a little more comfort. So I am uncomfortable. I am hesitant. I believe in vaccines. However, I do not believe in the way this whole program is conducted. Similarly, for example, I do not believe that there needed to be mandates. Did they
Yeah.
think that people are fools who cannot make a decision for themselves? I think they should have provided information. If Mobeen or Haider could sit down and provide a lots of information for people to make better decision or be better educated, couldn't they do it? They have billions of dollars of budgets. So I'm angry about
Mhm.
this.
No, no, it's something that deserves, I think, everyone's anger, and we should be holding people accountable for this, right? The people
Yeah,
who are in
yeah,
charge, the people who, um, were
yeah,
perhaps at
but they're
fault.
not holding people to account. I mean, these people who should have been held to account, instead, now they're going after the doctors who had been trying to help during this time. That is upside down.
Yeah, actually, just lately in the last few days, I came to know about this bill in California, in the California legislature, which will probably pass, that will hold physicians accountable if they, speak out about the COVID-19 pandemic in any way that hasn't been approved by the FDA or the CDC, and they may actually, they can be brought up in front of the medical board and censured, or perhaps even lose their license
Yeah,
for speaking against the approved narratives. And the most ridiculous thing about the bill is that it's kind of as if they're saying this is the scientific truth, and we're certifying it, right? The CDC has said this, so it must be true, and the FDA has said that, these off-label treatments are ineffective, so that's the truth, right? That the legislature certifies, and because of that, we think that physicians should be censored, for speaking out, against that,
Yeah.
God-given truth, as if it's, coming from heaven. And that's, I
I'm
think,
going to
one of
show
the most
you.
concerning things.
Sorry, please complete your thought.
No, no, no. Go ahead. I'm just, concerned that our science is suffering, right? So already researchers are self-censoring. They're not asking all the questions that they would have been asking if they could freely in a free society. But if legislation like that passes, then it'll become even worse going forward.
Yes. So if you show my screen for a second, I want to show
Yes.
you one more thing. So on one end, physicians who are trying to help, or who were trying to help and still are trying to help, they are being punished. On the other hand, this is the quality of production, information production, from this is National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Strokes. This is that institute. And
Mm.
guess what they did here? They said we gave corticosteroids and patients said they are better. Where is this? They somewhere over here. Let me find it. Here. So if you see here, 58% of the patients treated with oral corticosteroids had complete or near complete improvement after 2 weeks, compared to 9% of patients who did not receive immunotherapy having full recovery at 12 weeks. So this gives you a thought that, well, that means corticosteroids improved the patient, they are
Hmm.
improved. And similarly, they say somewhere over here for the IVIG here, at 5 to 9 months post symptom onset, 3 non-recovering patients. So doesn't this give you an idea that, okay, there are three, everybody else
Only
recovered,
three
three are
left.
left,
Yeah. Right.
right? Non-recovering patients received intravenous immunoglobulin with symptom resolution within two weeks. So your impression becomes, okay, fine, the one that are left, they got IVIG and they also got recovered,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Here is a problem. Heather, you practice medicine every day. You know that if you give corticosteroid, whatever kind of inflammation is there, patient is going to feel better.
Right.
Similarly, if somebody is in inflammatory autoimmune attack and you give them electro IVIG, they might feel better. But we also know that that feeling better is only going to be for a few days, and there can be a relapse if the underlying pathology is still present. Do you think that these doctors did not know this in NIND? They actually only took the feedback within the time that these drugs were working to say, how
Hmm.
are you doing? And the patient said,
Right.
I'm doing great. They said, okay, patient said they are doing great.
Yeah.
They never asked afterwards. They didn't ask them now. Out of these 23, I am in contact with one or two, and these two say that we are in contact with another 5 or 10, and
Hmm.
they are all 5 or 10 are still suffering and they're still getting medication. These guys did not go back to ask them again. Why? Because if they ask them, then they'll have to update their study to say, you know what? They are not recovered. Isn't this misguiding and
It's
misinterpretation and
extremely
misinformation?
misleading. Yeah, it's disinformation actually. I just in the
Right?
California bill they mentioned that misinformation is, you get it wrong. Disinformation is when you do it on purpose. You're actually have a a bad intention involved with misinformation. So this is
Right?
disinformation, certainly. Yeah.
And this is, do you know, for audience, this is equal to, you have a cancer patient, you give them painkillers, cancer patient says, I'm feeling better, my pain is less, and you say the cancer has been cured. This is what they did.
Yeah. Yeah, this is terrible.
This is the
This,
level.
yeah, no, no, this is absolutely terrible and terrifying. Unfortunately, that this is what we're getting from the people that we have trusted, for decades in modern medicine. But this, reminds me of something. I just want to mention briefly. Dr. Patterson and his group doing this research into the incel kind panel and the S1 subunit of the spike protein. They're the only ones that I know of. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Is there anyone else that's trying to figure out the underlying pathophysiology? What's the trigger of long COVID? I mean, you see all these mainstream media articles, and it's just a bunch of doctors throwing up their hands saying we don't know what's causing it. We don't know how to treat it.
Correct. Yeah. So there is Dr. Patterson's group. I believe there is Dr. Rasia Pretorius in South Africa.
Mm,
There is some digging going on within the FLCCC. Even this morning, I was talking with Dr. Paul Marek to see what are the new studies and the coconut oils and others. So
mm,
yes, there are a fewer number of people who are doggedly going after these situations, and interestingly, they are being punished.
yeah.
I do not now remember how many times I had to lawyer up. Me, the educator,
Mm,
I had to lawyer up to go defend myself. And people were making all kind of shit that they were saying Mobeen is doing. So it is just a very strange environment. And I would close this one topic by saying that vaccines with a program that would have been evolving in front of us to say, we do not know the side effects. Now we know the side effects. Now we know more side effects. This is a new thing. And as we are growing, we are figuring it out. And here is the plan to help. That is nowhere. That makes me mad.
So, what about just the underlying technology of the mRNA shots, for example? I mean, do you think that was a technology that made sense to use for for this pandemic in the way that it was used, with the understanding that they must have known, or they did know, right, that the lipid nanoparticles would escape the shoulder and go everywhere throughout the body, presumably taking the mRNA with them and setting up little spike protein factories in cells and the ovaries and the blood vessels, and all these different scattered locations. I mean, do you think that's a promising technology to use for this, to stick an mRNA that
Now that
codes
you
for the
say it
spike
this way, do
protein?
you think I'm going to say yes? No. So let me give some explanation to this one, just from a technology point of view.
Mm.
mRNA technology is beautiful. I love it. The nanoparticle and that goes into the cell and offers the cell an mRNA, and the cell can use that to make some medicine. The
It's a very elegant idea, right?
right. So from a technological point of view, it's a beautiful idea. I love this idea. The lacking part, the missing part still is to say, hey, we found this issue with this vaccine, may that be mRNA or adenovirus or something else. And here is how we are. Look, now they say that Johnson and Johnson is, don't take it, right? They almost are in that position. They knew about Johnson and Johnson. Many of these patients here in this study had Johnson and Johnson. They knew it. Why did they keep quiet?
Hmm.
They kept quiet because in their whatever wisdom they had, in that wisdom they thought these injuries are less important. They call them rare. I would call them, they meant collateral damage. They said these injuries are rarer than the benefit these will give. And now they say, well, stop, the benefit is not more. They knew these things. If they had been transparent with us to say, we found this information here, doctors, do this, ask your patients to be careful this way, or putting a label on Johnson and Johnson vaccine that it may cause harm to women under 50. What does that do to a woman? You didn't ask her to stop, you just said, hey, you may be injured. But if they had a plan to say under 50 women don't take Johnson and Johnson, under 30 men don't take mRNA vaccine, over 60 take Johnson and Johnson or mRNA vaccine, over 60 if you are Alaskan or Native American don't take Johnson and Johnson. If they had given that kind of a plan, it would have been okay. They just did not do it. That is the negligence, in my opinion.
So, what about I'm sure you're aware of the studies, or the study where they found mRNA persisting in people's lymph nodes. I don't know how long it was, 6 weeks
Yes,
maybe.
I actually saw that study a few days ago. Yes, a few weeks ago.
Yeah. I mean, what's your interpretation of that? I mean, how do you explain an mRNA persisting for that? I mean, so what I've heard, let me know what you think about this. Two things, maybe DNA plasmids, it retro
Hmm.
converts into DNA and it stays as a plasmid in the cytoplasm, or retrointegrating into the, into the into nuclear DNA. And aside from that, I don't know. How do you explain? I mean, I know there's the pseudouridine and it's a little bit stronger, but even then, you wouldn't expect it to last that long, right? So, what do you
Yeah.
make of that?
So the study, it is actually interesting. I discussed that study.
Hmm.
The study itself was actually a pro-vaccine study to say, hey, look,
Mm.
vaccine works in these interesting ways that were not known before.
Well, everything
And so
has to be a
one of
pro-vaccine study nowadays just to get
right,
published. Yeah.
Oth- otherwise it's not going to come out.
Hmm.
Correct. I actually the most I'll get back to this one in a second. I want to actually show you. Let me first open it up. I want to show you a very. Um, I thought it was kind of fun to see that. So just give me one quick second. I want to read it. I want to open it. Okay, so I have opened my video, and now I'm gonna. Sorry, my video start. One second. Um, I think this is the one. Okay, so if I can share my screen, you would actually enjoy this, or this will confirm what you're saying. So I talked about this study. It is, and interestingly, the author of the study reached out and he said, "Good job. It is my study. Can I share it on my website as well?" So
Mm.
this is a study that was published on 18 May 2022. So recent study. The study is at the Pfizer BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine associated tinnitus and treatment with transcranial magnetic stimulation. So I discussed that a few minutes ago in this talk, in your talk here. But here is something that is very interesting. At the end of the case report, this is now, remember, this is a case report that there is a woman who got the vaccine, got injured, and they helped her with this, right? But they say, check this line out, or statement. Finally, in consideration of benefit and this minor and reversible adverse event, although tinnitus is not minor and reversible,
Mm.
we still strongly recommend the continuation of the administration of the Pfizer BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine. I consider these statements to be the pass. You know, what is your secret password, as we used to
Yes.
play when we were
Yes.
younger?
Yes.
This is that secret password to say,
Yeah. It's your hall
please let my
pass. Yeah.
study,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Please
It's your
let it be
bathroom
printed.
pass.
I'm not bad mouthing anything.
Yeah.
Just so they put this in there, but then the rest of the study is interesting. So your point is correct that some of these statements are necessary. This particular study that you mentioned, this is actually a large study. And in that study, what they said was, what are the other things that happen when mRNA vaccines are done or mRNA therapy is done?
Mm.
So, in that, what they did was they observed that once the mRNA vaccine is given, let's say in the deltoid, from the deltoid, the macrophages that have picked up the cells that had mRNA in them. So let's say the muscle cell becomes infected, or if local fibroblast or some other local cell becomes not infected, gets the vaccine, it shows spike protein pieces on its surface. Macrophage comes and eats it up and takes it all the way to the lymph node. Lymph node would then have B cells and T cell respond and proliferate, and attack would start. Those macrophages and those RNAs live in lymph node for months. This is what was not known.
Mm.
And that means that for months, our body would continue to respond, work with the mRNA and respond to mRNA, or mRNA's outcome, that is making spike proteins. This was not known before. From a mechanism point of view, we knew that macrophages go to the lymph node with the antigens. They did not know that the whole mRNA pieces would end up in the lymph node, and they would be making spike proteins even over there as well, and for months. That actually explains why some people keep getting spike protein related long vaccine injury symptoms for months. And this actually explains why Johnson and Johnson, which is not mRNA, why Johnson and Johnson for months continues to produce the messenger RNA,
Mm.
the spike proteins. So there are those studies. I thought when these studies would come out, Heather, I really thought the healthcare administrations would come out and they'll say, we have more data now. In light of those data, and we have a sufficient number of population who has become, let's say, vaccinated or had gotten infected and recovered, that we believe we can, pull our our speed a little bit and not push everyone towards the vaccines. I don't see that wisdom yet prevailing at all.
So, I get a little dazzled with these bright lights. It kind of affects my thinking, but maybe I missed something there. I think I blanked out for a second. But you were talking like, did you address like how it's like actually physically possible for the mRNA to last this long when, most people think mRNA may last for a few hours, regular mRNA.
Yeah.
And does it have something to do with the macrophages
Yeah. So
holding on
let
to
me
it,
explain.
carrying it into the
Yes,
cell
I'm going to
or
talk
to
about
the lymph
duration
node?
now. Yes. So let's do it. mRNA went into the muscle. The first Pfizer's the pharmacodynamic paper showed that 80% of the mRNA and the spike proteins generated as a result stayed within the deltoid for 2 days. Then, for 11 days or more, somewhere about 11 days, the lipid nanoparticle pieces continued to be circulating in various parts of the bodies, and they were lodged in ovaries and liver and other parts.
Hmm.
So that is one piece of information that we know. Second piece was this study that you mentioned. This piece said that, now let me back up for a second. Within here, when mRNA goes within here, meaning deltoid, when the mRNA gets into a cell, the cell can hold on to the mRNA for up to 8 days. A cell processes an mRNA piece in 8 to 10 hours to make the resulting protein. And then that protein is processed and packaged and refined, and that can take another day or so. So, production of the protein starts within 6 to 8 hours of injection, continues for a couple of days, then the mRNA disappears, ideally, in theory, and lipid nanoparticle stays on in various tissues for 11 days.
Hmm.
So that was here. What was not known in pharmacodynamic paper from Pfizer was, can that mRNA go somewhere else?
Right.
And they said it in their paper. They said, in our paper,
Hmm.
we were not following mRNA because we assume mRNA in this tissue will disappear. So we were only following the radio labeled lipid nanoparticle. However, this new study came in and said we were following mRNA.
And
And
they
they
only
saw,
found it in the lymph nodes? Like, I
so
also have
look,
to
that is
ask
the
you,
thing.
so we know for sure the
That
mRNA is not being carried by lipid nanoparticles everywhere else?
no. So I will give you the you know that this is a rhetorical question. This study was aimed at what happens in the lymph nodes,
Yeah.
right? That means if another study, let's say you and I decide to do a study, and we say, you know what, we are going to go look for mRNA in liver, and we
Or
find
ovaries
mRNA in the
or
liver,
the heart,
right?
you know?
And then we come back and we say, well, we found the mRNA in the liver. That would not mean that it is not in the other tissues. We were only
Mhm.
looking in the liver,
Right.
correct? So this particular study was looking in the local lymph nodes or
Yeah.
local
Draining.
regional lymph
Yeah.
nodes
Mm.
to see if the mRNA is in them. And they found the mRNA in them, and they found the cells containing the mRNA living for a couple of months. That means these were immune cells that were continuously active, and there were inflammatory interleukins present that kept giving them longevity, that kept blocking their apoptosis, and they lived on. Now, going back to your question, was this happening in other parts of the tissues? Don't know.
Mm.
That study did not address that.
Right. So, still, the main question is that mRNA, does it make sense for it to persist in the cytoplasm of any cell for for weeks or months and not just a few hours? Like, shouldn't it break down, even if it has the pseudo-uridine, shouldn't your body eventually break it down?
Yes.
I mean, it's not a long-lived particle that
Yeah.
lasts
So I will
typically for
answer
weeks.
this question as well. So you have collected very good questions, Heather.
I'm just
So yes,
following where they lead. You're leading us in the right direction, I think.
correct. So ideally, an organic nucleotide made mRNA will be destroyed or will be uh, endonucleated. So endonucleases and exonucleases will attack it and break it down. You read that, I read that as well. And that can take a couple of days. However, these mRNAs that are in the vaccines were manipulated intentionally,
Hmm.
I'm hoping with good intent, to make them longer living so that they're not immediately broken down. So they had nucleotides that were not the same nucleotides that are found within us when we eat food and get nucleotides from them. So these were modified nucleotides. That means they could live on for a longer time. One, now how long is still, one study said 2 months. Maybe there'll be another study, they'll come back and say 6 months or 1 year. I believe Johnson and Johnson lives on for a longer time. The other possibility with this mRNA for living longer is that just like the spike protein living longer in a monocyte, and when that monocyte's time is up to be dead, then another monocyte possibly eats it up, and now the spike protein transfers from this dead monocyte or dying monocyte to into a new fresh monocyte. So it is also possible that that mRNA is now just moving from cell to cell as these cells are being phagocytosed within the lymph node. Then this is also possible that those cells that are inflammatory cells and have mRNA in them, when they are active, they would turn off their apoptotic signals off. They would turn off their nuclear factor kappa B signals off. The result is they would not die. So there are so many reasons that mRNA, this modified extrinsic and mRNA, could end up being longer living and the cells longer living.
I see. Yeah, that makes
And
sense.
that is what should be researched, and they should talk
Yes.
about it to say, we expected it or didn't expect it, or here is how to stop that.
So another question kind of along the same lines of should we have used this technology and these vaccines in this pandemic or any vaccines? So are you familiar with Gert van den Bosch and his theories, what he's been talking about?
Yes,
have you
yes,
have
yes.
have you spoken about that? I mean, what's your interpretation of his um, conclusion that really we should not be vaccinating into a pandemic because that'll perhaps influence the evolution of the virus. And his latest warning is that he thinks that in the next few months there will be evolution of the virus into a form that's more dangerous for specifically vaccinated individuals. It'll be able to get into their lungs instead of remaining in the upper respiratory system. So kind of a couple of questions there, but just what's your general impression of his theory? Why is he right or wrong? And yeah, basically that.
So I heard that he has been a guest on your channel.
Yes, yes.
So I'm gonna try not to be uh,
Well, just say
not
what
to
you
push
think.
back.
I mean, it's fine.
Yeah. So I feel that his theories are riding. These are incorrect theories, riding on the natural evolution of the virus. So, for example, here is how. If I can share my screen once more,
Sure. Yeah. Oh,
and if I can go to, let's say, next strain, and if I go to COVID. So, if you look at the COVID variants from the beginning of the time when the COVID started, the SARS-CoV-2 started, it had been varying or mutating from then on. And there is a rate of mutation, which is actually, interestingly, coronavirus rate of mutation, I believe 20 to 30 mutations per year type of a rate. which is
Hmm.
not a very high rate. That rate is not changed. It was the same before, it is the same after and before and after the vaccines.
Hmm.
How he's able to have his theories ride on certain observations is the following: there are variations. So you can say that these variations are because of the vaccines, because there are vaccines too, but there are variations before. Similarly, you could say, for example, I could make this claim that the variations are because the people who have, let's say, HIV, the variants are living in them and becoming more and more varied. Or I could say those who are infected, every time they're infected, they're making more variants, and that is what is causing it. Or those who are infected, they are also creating a selection pressure, and that is what is causing it. So my point is, virus has its behavior of varying, number one. Number two, as the selection pressure would increase on the virus, meaning we would let less people live with the virus, only those viruses that are able to live with us in that pressure will be able to survive. So natural mutation is going to occur and natural selection is going to occur. The interesting thing where I feel that there is a uh, where I don't agree, or I offer a counter example, that is, these theories had been promoted as that if you vaccinate people, you will create more and more dangerous viruses, which would cause more and more damage. And in the beginning, his message was, let the virus go through the society without the vaccine and let it infect as much and spread as
Hmm.
much. I'm paraphrasing his message. The the situation is that as the virus has been evolving with us, it is actually not becoming lethal, however you want to say lethal. For example, there are studies that say that the virus itself is less lethal, and there are studies that say that virus is not less lethal than delta omicron, but the population's status is such that virus doesn't find a lot of host to infect them and to kill them, or they are mostly, people are protected who are vulnerable. Whatever are the factors, let's say it's a combination of all of them, the variants are actually becoming more and more human friendly. So even when we move forward in time, so far we are not seeing it to become worst. For example, I'll give you a more empirical evidence that for the last 2 years, going out, everybody is wearing masks, and people are, 6 feet distant, and all that was happening. Now when I go out, there are people sitting in the Starbucks, they're sitting next to each other, there are groups back in the Starbucks, they're talking, they're having coffee, they're laughing, they're having fun. They don't have masks. Some Starbucks employees are wearing it, some are not wearing it, some people are wearing it, mostly do not have masks, and they're fine. There is no scare of that kind. Similarly, I was looking at the numbers. So for example, here in the US, I'm going to share my screen once again. Although the case numbers may not be the best anymore, because we are really, really not good with case counting. For example, I got COVID, nobody counted. I called my doctor.
Hmm.
I wish you were my doctor. I called my doctor and I said, I think I have COVID. He said, okay, stay home. I said, I think I should get tested. He said, no, you don't need to be tested.
Hmm.
This is happening. So I was not counted. And I'm sure that there are many people not counted. However, if you look at the death rate, then if you see here, this is February 6, 2022, 2,506 deaths, 2,609 deaths. That is a kind of daily new confirmed deaths. And now at this time, 287, and so on, declining. My point is, whosever's theory is right or wrong, we are still reaching the end of pandemic. This is what was not predicted. when these theories were offered. So, whatever is the right answer, the pandemic is becoming over and the virus is becoming more aligned with us. I think the actual thing to focus on now is number one, long COVID, and number two, vaccine injury. That
So just
is a
yeah, I
huge.
absolutely I agree with you. That is not getting enough airtime at all. It's being swept under the rug. But just to go back to a couple of things you said, so that I understand what you're saying about his theories. Um, I'm not sure if you were saying this or not, but what I understood from him was that um, the vaccines aren't creating variants, they're selecting them, right? So the variants are already, the virus makes variants, just that's evolution, but the immune pressure from the vaccine helps select certain ones. So one question I ask you is, we did see Delta, as I understand, was a little worse, right? And now
Yeah,
Omicron is
yeah.
much better. So why did the virus kind of evolve into a worse form, and now it's a less severe form? And since that already happened, since Delta already happened, why couldn't it go back in the other direction and become more severe again?
That's a very good question. And again, if we keep getting the uh, Bosch's theories in the mix, if we had his theories, then what we would be saying is after Delta, there'll be a Delta's plus, which would
Mm.
be even more dangerous because it would just keep selecting through the vaccine's filter and more dangerous and more vaccine escaping viruses. If let me add one more statement here.
He has an interesting. I mean, his theories are a little bit subtle, and they're so advanced that I have trouble following him. So his latest is that if I understand it correctly, the vaccinated patients, um, they have the virus has escaped their neutralizing antibodies, and now it's being bound by their non-neutralizing antibodies. And what he says is there's research showing that when the non-neutralizing antibodies bind to the spike protein of the virus, this somehow actually makes it a less severe infection. They're not able to go into the lungs. So he thinks that now it's
So
going to
can I?
evolve to evade that, immune pressure that's preventing the severity in vaccinated patients. But go ahead.
So if you have time, I'm going to
Hmm.
explain this. I
I
had
have plenty of
explained
time,
this.
and I'm very grateful that you're staying on
Okay.
with us.
So the cool beans who are here, you know that I'm busy here. That is why I may not have a great lecture this evening. So forgive me. And uh, Heather, if you can share my
Yeah,
screen,
yes, yes,
I
I
will
see it.
draw. So here is the basic idea that we are discussing, and I had done this discussion in detail. At the same time, you are much more articulate than I am. So you said the theories are advanced. I had said that these theories are incorrect. So my
Mm.
apologies. Again, that means no offense to Geared.
No,
That simply it could be my
no, I
naivete. It
think we
may be
need
my
to have some,
yes.
conflict,
So
to
yeah,
advance science, right? You need
correct,
to
to
have a
reach the truth or to keep
yes.
exploring. So here is what happens. So let's say here is the virus. The virus, this virus entered a person who that person had a vaccine. So let's say this is the lipid nanoparticle or adenovirus, and that was given, and that made um, the spike protein. And the spike protein, because it was just the spike protein and not the whole virus, of course, the body made antibodies against the spike protein. Now, spike proteins has, I think, about 12 to 1300 amino acids, which would mean divided by 3 is the number of uh, sorry, 12 to 1300 amino acid multiplied by 3 is the nucleotide. So 12
Mhm.
1300 amino acid, let's divide them 1200 by 10 to say 120 unique epitopes. And I'm not discussing the epitopes that may be overlapping. For example, here is 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. Let's say this is one epitope. Second epitope could be actually six, and two more over here, which one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, they could this be an
Mhm.
epitope as well. So
Mhm.
two epitopes could be overlapping. So that means there could be hundreds of kinds of antibodies. But here is the theory that you just mentioned as well. What Geert said was, he said, look, we make neutralizing antibodies, which will mean they bind here where the virus and the ACE2 will convert. That's one possibility. If the virus makes a mutation here, which allows this antibody to fail because it cannot bind there, then either this antibody is going to bind here loosely. That means instead of binding completely to those 7 or 10 amino acids, it's binding to 6 of them, or this antibody would not bind here at all because of the mutation. And now the antibodies that are still binding are binding in the other parts of the vaccine, spike protein, which are kind of not neutralizing because they do not stop the
Mhm.
virus from attaching to ACE2. Now, these antibodies are non neutralizing antibodies. And so, what the theory said was that if we end up with the non neutralizing antibodies, I want to change my color, non neutralizing antibodies, because the virus has made mutations here,
Mhm.
then this is a weaker mechanism of protection. And so, when this person will become infected with a virus of such mutations, then that person will not be able to prevent the virus from getting into the cell,
Mhm.
and he would still get infected. So, now let me explain why there are so many gaps in here. Number one, if the antibodies do get attached to the other part of the spike protein, but the virus is still able to get to the ACE2 and bind and get in, then all the discussion of antibody being weak or strong is gone, because virus has entered the cell, it has done the infection, and we all know how infections go. In some people good, in some people bad. So could we say that the vaccine did not help from the infection? Yes, we could say that. So this is the breakthrough infection. Other possibility, let's say that this mutated virus had a loosely attaching antibody that did prevent it somewhat from binding to the ACE2, but not completely. Enough that now this virus cannot enter the cell, but it is still hanging on there on the ACE2. And there are non-neutralizing, so let's make a whole virus here. And there are non-neutralizing antibodies that are connected in other places. This is presented as a bad situation, that there is a loose protection, inability to get into the cell. However, there are weaker antibodies still attached. And the immune system says, my job is done. I have made antibodies. They are attacking this virus, but the virus is really not taken care of. What is missing in this theory is the following. Whenever, and Heather, I think you and I both read this, opsonization
Mhm.
in our school times. Opsonization is that when a pathogen or an allergen or something offending is coated with
Mhm. Yes.
antibodies
Yes.
or complement system, correct?
Mm. Yeah.
This opsonization allows this pathogen to be eaten up by the immune system cells, macrophages.
Right.
One. Second, the antibodies that are attached would activate the complement system. I am very happy uh, to be told wrong that this will not happen, but this is undergrad level immunology.
Mm.
When the antibody would start the complement system in turn will make the complement cascade activation, and that would make the complement C9 activation, and the whole complex would make these um, holes in the virus and kill it. Thirdly, we know that when the vaccine has attacked, sorry, antibodies have attached with the pathogen, then these antibodies will attach with the Fc gamma receptors, which are on macrophages, which are on B cells, which are on NK cells, which are on the neutrophils, which are even on the platelet. And this connection will also cause this pathogen to be destroyed. So pathogen virus, by having a loosely attaching antibody, is actually worse off now because it is sitting alone out in the street and it is coated by the antibodies which are non-neutralizing antibodies. And now this pathogen is going to be attacked by the macrophages, by the neutrophils, by the NK cells, by the complement system. It is going to have these holes punched into it and it will be destroyed. So it is not going to sit here outside to say, I'll make more progenies of mine, which are going to be different type. It won't have a chance to make more progeny. To make the progeny, it has to get into the cell. And if it
Mm,
has to get into the cell, then the concept of neutralizing and not neutralizing is mute or moot
mm,
in the right way.
yeah.
So the whole theory, then there is another part of this theory. I discussed this, I read it. I'm sure that there is evolution. I'm fine with that. Then there is another part of the theory. That theory's part is that when a person becomes infected who was vaccinated, then what happens is vaccine causes their innate arm. So here is the innate arm. Here is the acquired arm. Acquired arm. And I would keep saying, I mean, no disrespect to Geert or anyone else. They have a theory. I'm sure that they have a knowledge base that I don't. So they may be right. I'm just providing my perspective. This is acquired arm. So there is a theory that acquired arm will suppress the innate arm. And the result is that when the infection appears again in this person, their innate arm is depleted. That was the word used in his paper. Depleted. It was a translation from German to English. So I do. In the English translation, it said finished. I call it
Mm,
depleted. I'm sure
right.
that he can explain whatever he meant by that. So let's say incapacitated, depleted, unable to work. If that happens, then the theory says this virus that has appeared is going to attack and easily get hold in the body and make its progenies because the immune system is not able to handle it. The problem is if you have a human being whose innate arm is suppressed, then that human being is not in fear of a virus. That human being is going to die with cancers very soon. He's going to die with other infections very soon. His microbiome in his gut, the billions of bacteria sitting in there, are going to attack him and he cannot do anything about it. His mucosal membrane, normal flora, is going to become opportunistic and kill him. As soon as innate arm is gone, the person is gone. That is
Mm.
also not possible because even when we say that there are vaccine injuries or vaccinated people become infected, we are not seeing their innate arms to be totally gone. So these are just some mechanisms with the vaccines and infections. We have some protections developed. There are going to be the variants of the virus that will have to live through that protection as well and figure out how do we stay on. Fortunately for us, so far they are becoming more and more adaptable to us as well. And I hope and I
Great.
pray, I always say this, I hope and I pray that this adaptation uh, becomes continuous and this Omicron doesn't become Delta again.
Yeah, just to kind of close out this kind of segment of the interview.
Yes.
Um, so looking into the future, you're expecting that the pandemic is kind of winding down. So kind of going back to that initial question, if you could have gone back in the past, would you change your decision? What would you tell people, maybe yourself or theoretical person, about booster shots at this point in time, whether you're vaccinated or you're not vaccinated? Does it make sense still, with the current kind of crop of infections out there and what you see? happening in the future. Do we need to continue vaccinating indefinitely for this? I mean, will we learn to live with it? Is there some,
Very good
thing
question.
such as vaccine-acquired immunodeficiency syndrome that people are talking about? So what is the current situation? If you were at the head of the CDC, what would you be
Yes,
telling
agreed.
the American people to do?
So I will comment on this. I want to answer one question here, which I just saw. The comment was, Pete plays Norsk Gaming says it's only depleted against SARS-CoV-2. The definition of the innate arm is it is non-specific.
Hmm.
The acquired arm is specific. That means it is the acquired arm, T helper cells, cytotoxic T cells, B cells, that are against a specific pathogen. Innate arm, by definition, is non specific. So it cannot be depleted against one type and not against another. If a macrophage is gone, it is gone for everything. If a neutrophil is destroyed, it is destroyed for everything. You can't say neutrophil for SARS-CoV-2 versus neutrophil for
Hmm.
streptococcus, for example. So that is just a quick update on that comment. Now, I answered this question, Dr. Heather, that you just. I have been calling you Heather. Heather is your last name or the first name? My
No, that's
apologies.
my last name. And just to explain to
Okay,
everyone, in
so
Pakistan,
Dr.
where
Heather,
Dr.
my
Mobeen and
apologies.
myself are
All my
from,
previous Heathers
yeah,
that I said, please, Dr. Heather, and I should call you Syed. So let me call you Dr. Heather and go from there more safe.
yeah, I just
So,
want to explain to people that, and I
yes.
usually say Syed Haider, but the pronunciation in Pakistan is Heather, so that's why
Yeah.
Dr. Mubin is calling me Heather, because he's Pakistani, and I am as well.
My apologies. And we
No
have
problem.
Heather as the first name. That's why I was calling him Heather. No, I didn't mean any offense.
No, no, no.
Um, so somebody asked me that, are you going to go for a booster? And I said, I got COVID. I had it, the vaccine before. Why do I need a booster now? My body just proved that I can be infected and recover. Why do I need to go get a booster? What is the reason for that? This is equal to having a person who is sleeping to wake him up and say, please take this sleeping medicine. Man, he's already sleeping. Let him sleep. So, if my body has proven that I can handle the virus, then leave it. Why are you pushing me for a booster or a vaccine? On the other hand, if the variant becomes so different that previous protection by the infection or vaccine has become useless, then that becomes another interesting question for the people to think about. Now, in terms of vaccine booster after booster, current vaccines, and by current, I mean the vaccines towards a wild type and towards a delta type, their total protection is what, 2 months now? UK's report was that within, what was that, 10 weeks, the efficacy drops down to 12% or lesser than 10.
Hmm.
That's nothing. So what did you bargain for? 10 weeks of protection for a risk of vaccine injury. And if you keep doing that, I think that the benefit is now less and the risk is more. If it was opening of the pandemic, the whole 7 billion people, a sitting duck for the virus, then you could have said, here are the people who we must protect. And their risk benefit analysis says that we can give them vaccine. At this time, majority of us are either vaccinated or previously infected. And if we are vaccinated and the efficacy is gone, then where is the new technology that we should use instead of the same vaccine again and again? So I am not a proponent or a fan of repeating the same vaccine, one, or repeating a booster, two, or giving the vaccine or booster to somebody who was infected and has recovered successfully. They've shown they're okay and their health is okay, meaning they didn't develop cancer or diabetes or something else afterwards. And then thirdly, there are certain genders, for example, adenovirus vaccines for women under 50 is not correct. And certain ages, for example, mRNA vaccines under 30 don't make sense to me. So I have more of a, if you said, if I was handling it, I would have given a map like this.
So there's been talk about, using the mRNA as a platform technology and, rapidly developing new variant vaccines within 90 days. Does this make sense? I mean, at that point, you're just throwing out the whole idea of, let's run a, kind of like you're kind of like going for the flu vaccine model where you just like, you're not testing them anymore. You've just
Yeah.
decided that this technology is safe, the platform is safe, and now we can just like throw in any kind of RNA we want in there and produce, slight variants to the, the spike protein.
So Moderna did that. Moderna actually kept coming up with slight variations to their mRNA to continue to catch up with the variants. At the same time, once again, regardless of all of this, current vaccines have not proven to be safe enough. At least for me, it is not safe enough. If you had a robust protective system to say, if somebody is injured, if we have hit a person on the road, we will not leave them on the curbside and drive away that, hey man, sorry, this happens rarely. We
Mm-hmm.
would actually tend to them and will take care of them. If that was the case, then the decision could be more easy. But at this time, lacking even the recognition of that, I don't think that the current vaccines are proving themselves to be safe enough, number one. And number two, to be effective enough to say we can give you longer lasting protection. So if they cannot give you protection, then I sometimes speak with my audience that this is even worse than the long lasting antibodies, monoclonals by, um, what was that Indian company? AstraZeneca. So AstraZeneca has a 6 months long monoclonal antibody. It's a modified antibody
Mm-hmm.
that provides 6 months protection, and the vaccine provides 2 months protection. Which one would you take? The vaccine or the antibody?
Right.
Right? So I am not a fan of these vaccines. I think they need to now go back. They should say, we have given billions of doses. We need to go figure out how is the virus behaving? How are these vaccines behaving? How is this platform? What are the side effects? How should we approach this any further? I don't think it is just keep doing the same thing and expect a different answer.
Yeah, that makes sense, and I agree with you. So maybe to shift completely to a different topic. Thank you so much for your time. I mean, I'll just keep you for a little bit longer, but I just wanted to get your kind of impression of what's going on with this latest monkeypox, scare in the media, and just to kind of frame the situation. I don't know what to make of this, but apparently there was a tabletop exercise a year ago, and it said, "What would we do if a monkeypox pandemic, broke out in on May 15th of 2022?" This they did early 2021, so that's a little bit unusual and strange. Kind of reminds people of Event 201 that happened a few months before the pandemic. And I don't mean to become like a conspiracy theorist or anything, but Robert Malone, published a Substack article, and he's the a person who worked on mRNA technology maybe 20, 30 years ago when it was first being developed, and he has some patents on mRNA technology, but he wasn't involved in the production of these particular vaccines. Anyway, so he had a Substack article in the beginning of this monkeypox kind of outbreak, just saying, don't worry about it, it's not a big deal. And then he just recently published another one where he was reviewing a paper where they had sequenced the genome, and they were concerned because, or he was concerned that it appeared to be evolving faster than you would expect for a DNA virus. And so he's now more concerned with the possibility of perhaps a lab leak or some kind of like release of a bioengineered version of monkeypox. So, can you just tell us a little bit about monkeypox, what you understand about it, why it's primarily being spread in men who have sex with men right now? I mean, has that happened before? Is this a different
Yeah.
version of the
Yeah.
monkeypox? And what do you see happening with monkeypox going forward?
This is such an interesting. So first there was this hepatitis that just started out of the blue,
Yes,
and
that's
we
another
did not
question.
know what happened. And now the monkeypox. The original monkeypox that we knew of was a West African disease, mostly present in the rodents in that area. Somebody asked me, is it because of having sex with the animals? Oh, I think we don't have sex with the rodents, at least. So it's not that. But still, it used to be in the rodents. From there, it could be contracted by humans if they come in touch with some injury on the rodent or the saliva of the rodents, or such contaminants from them. However, this was not seen that it is transmitted. So let me back up. This is known that the monkeypox transmits through bigger droplets. That means it's not aerosol, at least. This is, it seems like a similar story like pandemic. It's not aerosol, and now all of a sudden it is aerosol. It is said to be transmitted by bigger droplets, respiratory droplets. And secondly, previously known was that it can be transmitted from those pustules that are formed, and there are secretions in there, or there are this pus in there. And when somebody contracts that pus, and if they have a injury on their skin through which this that contamination can enter their blood or their tissue, that is how they could contract it. This is what was known. And then there were two variants of it. One was, I think, 10% lethal. One was 30% lethal. And here comes this new variant of monkeypox, which they are saying it is from men having sex with other men, even gays and bisexual, which, from this characterization, which tells me is that we studied in forensic medicine that anal sex is a little more rough compared to vaginal sex, which means that their microscopic lacerations on penis and or anal area are more common with the anal sex, and that means injury and then possibility of transmission is more common for some STDs. Monkeypox was not one of them.
Mm.
So how did now monkeypox get in that category is still not known. So because of that, and number two, the number of cases are increasing with a different rate, although not
Mm.
as fast as SARS-CoV-2, but
Mm.
still with a faster rate than how normally monkeypox spreads. So that is a concern there. And top that all off with, we just saw WHO 2 years ago messing up the whole situation. We just saw healthcare authorities missing their responsibility. So when now they come back and they say we are not afraid of it, we are not concerned about it, that doesn't give me that confidence that I could have if I had not seen their behavior in the pandemic. So what is my conclusion? My conclusion is that we need to figure out why it is happening more with sexual interaction. We need to figure out, why did this new variant come up? Is it because we were all locked down? Our immune systems were all in a different state. We were not exposed to, just like with hepatitis, to monkeypox like things. And all of a sudden, we went out again. We started our activities. And are we going to have many such outbreaks till we become normalized again with these pathogens? I do not know, but it concerns me. I am not feeling great about it. I also don't want to fall victim to those who are just incorrectly fear mongering it. That also doesn't look right. And then WHO saying, we are not concerned. That also doesn't seem right. There need to be a balanced approach to say, why is this happening? That part is not explained.
Mm. Dr. Mobeen, thank you so much. I mean, it's really been such a pleasure and an honor to talk to you. And, I have to maybe apologize to your fans who might have been watching and, reviewing so many things that they already know so well. I just don't get time enough to watch your videos. So, but I think, for the people who haven't had a chance to watch you, I think this meeting and video, I think will just give them some insight into why so many people love watching your lectures, because you go really in depth with the science and you explain it so well, and you draw these great pictures to illustrate it. So I hope that people who may not have heard of you before will go check out your YouTube channel. And just to wrap things up, I mean, is there anything you'd like to tell people in closing? Where can they find you on Twitter, Facebook, and just close us out here with a farewell.
Absolutely. So, first of all, thank you very much. I am actually your fan. I remember I invited you, you came in, and number one, you're so natural and you are yourself. And number two, you are just so sincere with your patient and the patient care. Never had me or my audience felt, apologies, something hit the
No
outside.
problem.
Never had we experienced you making up things or not seeking knowledge and information to figure out how to help, and never had you backed off to say, here is something that seems to be able to work. I'm going to work with my patients to see if it is safe and useful for them or not. So that puts you in that premium, that elite group of doctors who are doctoring instead of protocol pushing. So thank you for that. Thank you for coming to me first and having those discussions. We still miss you, and hopefully we'll have you soon with us. And thank you for inviting me. With this, um, I think at this time, more important are the three things. Monkeypox, hepatitis, yes, they are, but long COVID, vaccine injury, and psychological issues.
Mm.
The kind of issues that we are seeing in human interaction are very different from before pandemic. So there is a huge pandemic of emotional well-being not being there, and we are not taking care of it, and that can be a disaster. So I would request everyone to reach out to their friends, family, provide their love, ask them if they can help in any way, and help as much as you. We can't help everyone, but whoever you can, extend yourself for that. And that's where I am.
Yeah, just I'll just close with this memory. A wise person once told me, that if anyone's depressed, the solution for them is to go and find somebody in a nursing home who you don't know, and just sit with them every day for like 15 minutes, maybe 30 minutes, and just make them happy. And especially somebody who doesn't have anyone that who visits them. So ask the staff, is there somebody here who's lonely and they have no family ever come to visit them? Go and sit with that person, make them smile. And I've tried this myself, and it's really incredible that if you bring a smile to somebody's face for no particular reason, you just go to them and make them happy. That's one of the cures for depression and anxiety, and one of the surefire cures. One of the things that rarely, if ever, fails. So that's something that I tell people, and it wasn't my idea. Somebody told me about this, and just try it out. It's it really brings joy into your heart to bring joy to other people. So
Absolutely.
with that, thank you again so much. I mean, it was really an honor, and I hope to have you back. Maybe in a few weeks
Absolutely.
to give us some updates, and it would definitely be,
Absolutely.
my honor to have you frequently, hopefully. So with
Same
that,
here.
thank you so much, and goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.